"Those aren't sheriff's cars." I said it quietly, but Victoria Hargrove heard me. Her smile disappeared before the first black SUV even reached the cattle guard. 20 yards ahead of me, Luis Ramirez and Tom Bennett stood beside our irrigation trailer with their wrists restrained behind them. Dust coated their jeans. Tom had blood on one elbow where he'd apparently hit the gravel, and Luis was shouting at a man wearing a gray Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services uniform. We never crossed the fence. The guard ignored him. Another security officer stood beside my red cattle gate, holding the trail camera I had mounted there 3 days earlier. He had removed it from the post. That bothered me almost as much as the restraints. Victoria stood in the middle of my ranch road wearing a tailored pink blazer, white blouse, and black heels that sank slightly into the dry Texas soil. Behind her, 2 white security SUVs blocked the irrigation truck. The air smelled like diesel, dust, and hot cedar. I stopped my pickup 30 feet away and stepped out. "Take your hands off my men." Caleb Ross, Cedar Ridge's security supervisor, turned toward me. "Stay where you are." I looked at Luis. "You okay?" "They came through the gate, boss. Said we were trespassing." "On our own ranch," Tom added. Victoria stepped forward. "Your employees were detained for entering a protected utility corridor and interfering with community infrastructure." I looked down beside her left heel. A round brass survey marker was half buried in the dirt. I knew exactly what it marked. "They're standing on my property." "Not according to our records." "Then your records need a surveyor." Her expression hardened. "Nathan, this stopped being a neighbor dispute when your employees interfered with authorized access." I glanced toward the irrigation line. The trench Luis and Tom had been repairing ran 40 feet inside my recorded boundary. Nothing about it touched Cedar Ridge property. "Who authorized you to restrain them?" "Community security acted within its authority." "That wasn't my question." Caleb shifted his weight. "County deputies are on the way." Then engines rolled across the pasture behind me. Victoria looked past my shoulder and smiled. "Good. Law enforcement." I turned. 4 dark SUVs were moving along the county road, followed by another vehicle I recognized immediately. No county markings. No sheriff's star. No light bar arrangement used by the local department. I knew those vehicles because I had reviewed their deployment plan before sunrise. "Those aren't sheriff's cars," I said. Victoria looked at me. "What?" The lead SUV slowed near the cattle guard. I could see Sarah Whitmore through the windshield. Victoria still thought they were coming because of the scene in front of us. She thought somebody had finally arrived to decide whether my ranch hands had violated her HOA corridor. She was wrong. That convoy had been moving before Luis ever called me. The warrant had been signed before Caleb Ross put restraints on either man. And Victoria had absolutely no idea why federal officers were coming through my gate. To understand how an HOA president in black heels ended up standing between restrained ranch workers and a federal operation, you have to go back 12 days, to the afternoon she first decided that a line on her HOA map mattered more than a line recorded on my deed. I was replacing the lower hinge on that same red cattle gate when her pearl-white SUV stopped outside the fence. The August sun was brutal. Sweat had soaked through the back of my work shirt, and my hands were black with grease. Victoria climbed out looking like she was headed to a board luncheon instead of a cattle ranch. Pink blazer, white blouse, black heels. She glanced at my pickup, then the wrench in my hand. "Nathan Cole." "Depends who's asking." "Victoria Hargrove, president of Cedar Ridge Estates." She opened a leather folder and handed me a color map. A blue line crossed the eastern edge of my ranch. "We're beginning drainage improvements next week. Contractors will need access through this road." I studied the map. "Show me the easement." She blinked. "Excuse me." "The recorded easement giving Cedar Ridge access across my property. The HOA has maintained this route for years. Maintenance isn't ownership." Her smile tightened. "Our attorneys are satisfied that Cedar Ridge has emergency access authority." "Then send me the recorded instrument." "Mr. Cole, this project protects hundreds of homes." "Then paperwork shouldn't be difficult." I handed the map back. Victoria looked past me toward the ranch, then down at the brass survey marker near the gate. "You're really going to obstruct a community project over a technicality?" I wiped my hands on a rag. Property boundaries aren't technicalities. She left 10 minutes later. The next morning, a white Cedar Ridge security SUV appeared outside my fence. By sunset, my cameras had recorded it 3 times. At the time, I thought Victoria was trying to intimidate a rancher into opening a gate. What I didn't know was that the logo on that security vehicle was about to appear somewhere else entirely, on a federal operations board with my badge sitting on the table beneath it. The first thing Victoria sent me wasn't an easement. It was a warning. I found the envelope clipped to my red cattle gate at 6:20 the next morning, fluttering in the hot wind above the same brass survey marker she had dismissed as a technicality. Cedar Ridge Estates. Notice of unauthorized obstruction of community access. I read it twice while my coffee cooled in my hand. According to Victoria, my locked gate interfered with an established emergency and utility corridor serving Cedar Ridge. There was one thing missing from all 3 paragraphs: the recorded instrument proving that corridor crossed my land. I carried the notice inside, scanned it, and sent one reply. Please identify the recorded easement granting Cedar Ridge Estates access across the Coal Ranch parcel. No argument. No threat. Just one sentence. At 8:14, Victoria responded, Mr. Cole, the HOA's long-standing use and maintenance history establishes its access rights. Continued obstruction may expose you to liability for delays or damages associated with the drainage project. I printed that too. By noon, a white Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services SUV was parked outside my eastern fence. Luis noticed it first. They lost, he asked. Maybe. The driver never approached us. He photographed the gate, the ranch road, and my pickup before leaving. The next day, the SUV came back. This time Tom saw a guard photographing license plates on our equipment trailers. Want me to go ask what he's doing? No, why not? Because right now he's giving us information for free. I checked the trail cameras that evening. The same security company had driven past 3 times in 48 hours. One camera caught Caleb Ross stepping out, examining the gate chain, and photographing the brass survey marker. He didn't cross the fence. Not yet. I created a folder on my computer labeled Cedar Ridge Access and saved every clip with the date and time. Then I pulled my title documents from the safe. Survey, legal description, recorded plats. I wasn't a real estate lawyer, so I didn't pretend to be one. I sent copies to my attorney and asked a simple question. Do you see any recorded Cedar Ridge access right across this road? His preliminary answer came the following afternoon. Not in what you sent me. Could one exist somewhere else? Possibly. Title records can be messy. I'll run it properly. That was enough for me. I wasn't going to declare victory because one folder looked clean. People get themselves into trouble when they confuse confidence with proof. Victoria apparently had no such concern. Friday morning, another letter arrived. This one said Cedar Ridge would begin community security monitoring around the disputed corridor to protect contractors and infrastructure. At the bottom was a name I had already seen on the white SUV, Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services. I stared at the logo longer than I should have. Black shield, silver diagonal stripe, 3 small stars. Something about it felt familiar, but I couldn't place why. The answer came Monday at 7:05 a.m., 40 miles away from my ranch. I walked into a federal operations room wearing a charcoal jacket instead of a work shirt. My badge and credentials went on the table beside a paper cup of bad coffee. Sarah Whitmore stood at the front beneath a wall monitor while Marcus Reed worked through updates on a fugitive financial crime investigation our task force had been supporting for months. The target wasn't Victoria. It wasn't Cedar Ridge HOA. The case involved a wanted subject suspected of moving assets, records, and money through subcontractors and shell companies while avoiding federal process. Marcus changed slides. Corporate entities appeared. Vehicle registrations. Storage locations. Contract relationships. Then the next image filled the screen. A white security SUV. Black shield. Silver stripe. 3 stars. I stopped writing. Sarah noticed. Nathan. I looked at the company name beneath the photograph. Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services. Same logo. Same vehicles that had been photographing my ranch. I know that contractor. Marcus turned. How? My HOA hired them. The room became very quiet. Sarah lowered her marker. Anything personal involving them? Potentially. There's a property access dispute at my ranch. Their vehicles have been monitoring my gate. Marcus leaned back. You're kidding. Wish I was. Sarah closed the file in front of her. Then we document the conflict now. Agreed. If this contractor becomes operationally relevant, you're screened from evidence decisions involving the overlap. Agreed. Marcus studied me. You want off the case? I looked at the SUV on the screen. I want whatever keeps the case clean. Sarah nodded once. That was the difference Victoria never understood. Authority wasn't proving you could step across a line. It was knowing exactly where the line was and refusing to cross it. When I got back to the ranch that evening, the white security SUV was waiting beyond my fence again. This time I knew two things Victoria didn't. Her guards had been watching me. And somewhere inside a federal case file, people completely unrelated to our property dispute had already been watching them. 3 days later, Victoria stopped pretending the security trucks were there by accident. At 6:47 Tuesday morning, Luis found 2 orange cones sitting outside the red gate and a laminated sign zip-tied to my fence. Cedar Ridge Authorized Utility Access. Do not obstruct. I stood there with my coffee while cicadas screamed from the mesquite trees and the rising sun turned the dust orange. That ours? Luis asked. No, want it down. Photograph it first. He took pictures while I recorded the location, the gate, the brass survey marker, and the sign in one continuous video. Then I cut the zip ties and placed the sign in the ranch office. By 8, Victoria was calling. You removed HOA safety signage. You installed signage on my fence. That fence borders a protected access corridor. Send me the easement. A pause. We have already explained our position. You've explained your opinion. Our attorney disagrees. Then your attorney can send the recorded instrument. Her voice cooled. You're making this unnecessarily adversarial. I looked through the office window. The white security SUV was parked across the county road again. Victoria, somebody put cones and a sign on my property before breakfast. I'm not the one escalating. She hung up. An hour later, my attorney called. Nathan, I completed the title search. And I'm not finding a recorded easement granting Cedar Ridge the access they're claiming across that ranch road. Nothing. There are drainage instruments serving the subdivision, but the recorded descriptions don't cross your parcel where their map says they do. I leaned back. Could they have some unrecorded right? They can argue whatever facts they think support one. That doesn't mean they automatically have the right to send contractors through a locked gate. Don't play lawyer. Keep documenting and let me handle the title issue. Works for me. That afternoon, I emailed Victoria and Daniel Price, Cedar Ridge's attorney, requesting that no HOA employee, contractor, or security officer enter the ranch without permission while the access claim was being reviewed. Daniel replied professionally, received. We will review the title materials. Victoria replied 7 minutes later. Cedar Ridge will take all lawful measures necessary to protect community infrastructure. I printed both. Meanwhile, at work, the federal investigation was moving in a direction I wanted no part in shaping. Sarah kept her promise. Anything involving Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services that overlapped with my personal dispute was routed around me. I remained responsible for broader task force coordination, but Marcus handled contractor-specific evidence. That separation mattered. On Wednesday afternoon, Marcus stopped beside my desk holding a file. I can tell you one thing. If I'm screened from it, don't. Not case substance. Procedure. I waited. The contractor is operationally relevant now. I looked at him. Meaning keep your ranch issue clean. No threats. No badge. No federal references. I haven't made any. I know. Keep it that way. Planning to. He started walking away, then stopped. Your HOA president know what you do. She thinks I fix fences. Marcus smiled. You do fix fences. Better than I attend meetings. Thursday brought the first physical escalation. Tom was checking the irrigation pressure near the eastern pasture when a security SUV stopped outside the gate. Caleb Ross got out with another guard and called through the fence. You're interfering with a designated utility route. Tom radioed me instead of arguing. I drove over. Caleb stood outside the locked gate. Mr. Cole, Cedar Ridge has instructed us to maintain access. And my attorney instructed Cedar Ridge not to enter pending title review. We have authorization. From whom? The HOA. The HOA can authorize you to enter HOA property. I pointed at the brass marker. This isn't it. Caleb glanced down, then toward the trail camera mounted above him. You recording us? My camera is recording my gate. Security concerns may require us to document or remove devices interfering with operations. Don't touch my camera. His jaw tightened. Is that a threat? No. It's a very clear sentence. He stared at me for another second, then returned to the SUV. I watched them drive away. Tom exhaled. That guy wants a fight. Then don't give him one. What if they come through? Call me. Record what you safely can. Don't block a vehicle with your body. Don't touch anybody. Luis joined us. And if they try taking equipment? Same answer. Property can be recovered. Don't turn a boundary dispute into an emergency. I looked at both men. You hear me? They nodded. That evening, I replaced the batteries in the trail camera and checked its angle. The frame captured the gate, the ranch road, and the brass marker below. 3 details Victoria kept treating like obstacles. 4 days later, that camera would record her black heels stepping across the boundary she insisted didn't exist. And Tom's phone would record the words she would later wish she had never said. The call came at 2:18 Monday afternoon, while I was 40 miles from the ranch staring at a federal case map that had suddenly become far too familiar. Sarah Whitmore stood beside the operations board with one hand on the table. Marcus Reed had spent the previous hour walking us through contractor relationships connected to the fugitive investigation. I had stayed out of every discussion involving Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services. My conflict screen was documented. Marcus handled those records. Sarah handled evidence decisions. I handled the broader coordination that didn't touch my property dispute. Then Sarah's phone buzzed. She read the message, looked at Marcus, and said, "Judge signed it." Nobody cheered. Real warrants don't arrive with movie music. They arrive with page numbers, scope limitations, addresses, items authorized for seizure, and a responsibility to stay inside every line a judge approved. Marcus opened the signed packet. Search authority is confirmed for the contractor-connected location and specified records. I kept my eyes on the map. Anything involving Cedar Ridge. Sarah looked at me. Operational overlap exists. Then my screen stays. It does. Evidence decisions stay with you and Marcus. Correct. She paused. You can coordinate perimeter and personnel because of the larger operation, but you do not direct searches involving the conflicted material. Understood. That should have been the end of my involvement for the afternoon. Then my personal phone vibrated against the table. Luis. I let it ring once before stepping into the hallway. What's wrong? His voice came fast. Boss, security came through the red gate. I stopped walking. How? Caleb, had somebody cut the secondary chain. They're saying we're inside their utility corridor. Where are you? Irrigation trench. East pasture. Tom with you? Yeah. In the background I heard a man shouting. Then Tom's voice. Don't touch my phone. Luis lowered his voice. They're telling us to put our hands behind our backs. Every instinct I had wanted to move faster than procedure. I forced myself not to. Luis, listen carefully. Don't fight them. Don't threaten anybody. Keep your hands visible. They're on your land. I know. Should I call the sheriff? Yes. Call county dispatch if they let you use the phone. Tell them there's a property dispute and private security is restraining workers. Nothing more. You coming? I was already moving toward the exit. I'm coming. I called my attorney first. Then county dispatch myself to make sure the incident had been reported accurately. Only after that did I call Sarah. We have a problem. Ranch. Security entered through my gate. Luis says they're restraining him and Tom. Silence. Do you need to leave the operation? Yes. Go. Sarah, the warrant. The warrant proceeds according to plan. Your personal incident does not change it. Exactly the answer I needed. Keep me outside contractor evidence decisions. You already are. I grabbed my work jacket from the truck. Behind me, Marcus was briefing the federal team. Nobody changed the warrant because my employees were in trouble. Nobody added Victoria's name because I was angry. Nobody redirected a federal operation to solve my property dispute. The warrant had been signed before Luis called. That fact would matter later. The drive back took 31 minutes. It felt like 3 hours. Luis called again halfway there. They restrained us. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. Are you hurt? No. Tom scraped his elbow when they moved him away from the trailer. Where's his phone? Dropped near the irrigation pipe. I think it's still recording. Leave it. Victoria's here now. That changed nothing legally, but it told me exactly where the decision-making had gone. What is she saying? Luis hesitated. She told Caleb to hold us until the sheriff arrives. Anything else? He asked about the irrigation trailer. And, she said, secure everything in the corridor. I looked at the highway ahead. Don't argue. I'm 10 minutes out. When I turned onto the county road, Dust was already hanging above the ranch. 2 white security SUVs sat inside my gate. My red chain lay in the dirt. The trail camera was missing from its post. I could see Luis and Tom beside the trailer, both restrained. Caleb stood behind them. Victoria's pearl-white SUV was parked near the fence. She stood in the gravel in that same pink blazer, black heels inches from the brass survey marker. I pulled through the gate and stopped. Caleb raised a hand. Stay in the vehicle. I got out anyway, slowly, empty hands visible. Release my workers. Victoria turned. Nathan, your employees interfered with authorized community access. On this issue, I'm speaking as the landowner. They are on my recorded parcel, and County Dispatch is already responding. She gave me a cold smile. Then wait for someone with actual enforcement authority. Behind me, somewhere beyond the curve in the county road, engines began to grow louder. Victoria heard them too. Her smile widened. Mine didn't, because I knew exactly who was coming, and they weren't coming for my boundary dispute. Victoria watched the approaching vehicles with the confidence of someone who believed authority had finally arrived on her side. Good, she said, brushing dust from the sleeve of her pink blazer. Now we can settle this. I looked past her at Luis and Tom. Their wrists were still restrained. Tom's right elbow was scraped, but he was standing steady. Caleb Ross had positioned himself between them and the irrigation trailer. The missing trail camera sat on the hood of one security SUV. Caleb, I said, release them. He shook his head. We're waiting for law enforcement. County Dispatch is responding. Until then, you're private security standing on disputed property. Victoria stepped between us. Stop trying to intimidate my employees. They're not your employees. They're contracted by Cedar Ridge. That doesn't give them police authority. Her eyes narrowed. You really do think owning cattle makes you an expert on everything? I almost smiled. No, that's why I called my lawyer. Tires rolled over the cattle guard behind me. The first dark SUV stopped near my pickup. Sarah Whitmore stepped out wearing a navy field jacket. Marcus Reed exited the passenger side. 2 more federal vehicles followed, continuing toward the location authorized in the operation plan rather than clustering around our argument. Victoria stared at them. Where are the county deputies? Still coming, I said. Sarah approached but stopped several yards away. Her eyes moved from me to the restrained workers, then to Caleb, Victoria, the broken chain, and the security vehicles. Nathan, separate incident, I said. Personal property dispute. Private security entered the ranch. County has been called. That was all she needed. Sarah nodded. Understood. Victoria looked between us. You know her? Yes. From where? Marcus was already speaking quietly into his radio. Victoria stepped toward Sarah. I'm Victoria Hargrove, president of Cedar Ridge Estates. These men interfered with a protected HOA utility corridor. Our security personnel detained them pending sheriff response. Sarah's expression didn't change. Ma'am, we're not here to adjudicate your property dispute. Then why are you here? Sarah glanced toward me. I reached inside my jacket slowly and removed my credential case. Victoria's eyes dropped to it. I opened it. The color left her expression one careful degree at a time. Nathan Cole, I said. Deputy United States Marshal. Caleb looked at the restraints on Luis as though he had only just noticed them. Victoria recovered first. You're a federal marshal? Yes. And you never disclosed that? You asked for access to my ranch, not my resume. Her gaze jumped toward the federal SUVs. So you called your agency because we detained your workers? No, don't insult me. The operation you're watching was authorized before I knew this incident was happening. Sarah stepped forward. That is correct. Victoria looked at her. Then what operation? One unrelated to your boundary dispute. But he's running it. Sarah answered carefully. Marshal Cole has a supervisory coordination role in the broader operation. Because of his personal property dispute involving your security contractor, he is screened from relevant evidence decisions where those interests overlap. Victoria looked genuinely confused. Screened, meaning I don't get to use federal authority to settle my private problem, I said. Something you might want to think about. Her jaw tightened. Are you threatening me? No, I closed my credentials. I'm explaining why I'm not. A county sheriff's cruiser finally appeared beyond the gate. I felt more relief seeing that brown and white car than all the federal vehicles combined. The deputy who stepped out was Karen Mills, someone I knew professionally, but had never called about Cedar Ridge. I gave her the same short version I had given Sarah, and then stepped back. Luis and Tom told their own story. Caleb told his. Victoria produced the HOA access map. My attorney emailed the recorded survey and title documents directly to the deputy after I gave him permission. Nobody got to win by volume. Then Tom spoke. My phone. Everyone looked at him. It fell beside the irrigation pipe when they restrained me. It might still be recording. Deputy Mills retrieved it herself. The screen was cracked, but the recording was running. She stopped it, preserved the device, and documented where it had been found. Victoria's expression changed for the first time. Not fear. Calculation. Anything recorded was obtained during an active security incident, she said. Mills looked at her. We'll sort out what's relevant later. Behind us, a radio transmission came from Marcus's vehicle. The federal team had reached the authorized location connected to Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services. Victoria heard the company name. Her eyes snapped toward me. This is about our contractor. The warrant is part of an investigation that existed before your dispute with me. You expect me to believe that? Sarah answered before I could. You don't have to believe him. She held up the court-authorized paperwork in her hand. A federal judge already signed it. For once, Victoria had nothing ready to say. The wind pushed dust across her black heels and over the brass survey marker beside them. 12 days earlier, she had called that marker a technicality. Now county deputies were photographing it. Tom's phone had recorded what happened around it. And a federal operation involving her security contractor was unfolding beyond her control. She had wanted someone with a badge to settle the argument. What she hadn't understood was that badges came with boundaries too. The warrant didn't have Victoria Hargrove's name on it. That mattered more than anything I could have said to her. By the time Deputy Mills removed the restraints from Luis and Tom, the federal team was already working at the separate contractor-connected location covered by the court order. I stayed exactly where I belonged, beside my workers, outside the evidence decisions I had screened myself from. Luis rubbed his wrists. Tom sat on the irrigation trailer while a paramedic cleaned the scrape on his elbow. You okay? I asked. I've had worse from barbed wire. He looked toward Victoria. Barbed wire usually apologizes. Don't start. He almost smiled. Deputy Mills photographed the cut secondary chain, the red gate, tire tracks, brass survey marker, irrigation trench, and the trail camera sitting on the security SUV. Caleb watched her document everything. We removed the camera because it interfered with security operations, he said. Mills looked at the camera, then at the fence post 20 feet away. You can explain that in your statement. Victoria stepped forward. Deputy, Cedar Ridge has long-standing access rights here. Your attorney can provide whatever documentation supports that. I have the HOA map. I have a recorded survey coming from Mr. Cole's attorney. Victoria glanced at me. Of course you do. I said nothing. That irritated her more than an argument would have. Mills took separate statements from everyone. Nobody was arrested at the ranch. Nobody needed to be. The important thing was preserving what had happened without contaminating it with what was happening in the federal case. Around 4, Sarah walked back toward me from her vehicle. Need you for coordination. Anything touching Cedar Ridge Community Protection? Not evidence decisions. Good. Victoria heard us. You're still pretending these things are unrelated? I turned toward her. They are related only where the evidence says they are. My security contractor gets targeted by federal officers on the same day you challenge us over access? The warrant was signed before Louise called me. Convenient. Sarah spoke calmly. Mrs. Hargrove, the application and judicial authorization established the timeline independently of Marshal Cole. Victoria folded her arms. Then show me the warrant. If you're legally entitled to receive documentation in connection with the search, the appropriate personnel will handle that. Not Nathan. Victoria stared at Sarah, then me. You're protecting him. Sarah's expression remained flat. I'm protecting the process. That sentence followed me for the rest of the afternoon. At 5:26, Daniel Price, the HOA attorney, arrived. He stepped out of his sedan, looked at the broken chain, the sheriff's cruiser, the federal vehicles farther down the road, and Victoria standing in dust up to the edges of her black heels. What happened? He asked. Victoria answered first. Nathan escalated a routine access dispute into a federal spectacle. Daniel looked at me. Did you request federal involvement? No, Sarah answered from behind me. The federal operation predates today's ranch incident. Daniel's face changed. Lawyers listen differently when another professional gives them a clean timeline. He turned to Victoria. Did I authorize entry onto the coal property today? She hesitated. You said the access claim remained under review. That isn't what I asked. Community infrastructure couldn't wait indefinitely. Daniel looked toward Caleb. Who ordered the workers restrained? Caleb shifted. Mrs. Hargrove instructed us to maintain the corridor and hold anyone interfering until law enforcement arrived. Victoria snapped toward him. I told you to secure the area. You said hold them. Tom looked up from the trailer. Phone got that part. Silence. Victoria's eyes moved toward Deputy Mills, who had already documented Tom's device. Daniel closed his eyes for half a second. Nobody says another word about that recording until I understand what happened. For the first time, Victoria followed someone else's instruction. The sun was dropping when Sarah finally called me toward the federal vehicles. Marcus stood beside an open case folder but kept it angled away from me. We've completed the portion you're cleared to coordinate, he said. Anything I need to know? Only this. The contractor connection was not speculative. The authorized search produced material requiring further review. Does that involve Victoria? I'm not telling you that, because right now we don't know, and because you're screened. Perfect. He laughed once. You may be the only Marshal I know who enjoys being told less. Less is useful when the alternative is ruining a case. On my way back toward the gate, Victoria stopped me. Her blazer was dusty now. A strand of blonde hair had come loose near her cheek. This isn't over. I know. Cedar Ridge will defend its rights. It should. She seemed surprised. You think I'm wrong. I think records should decide the boundary. And the federal investigation? Evidence should decide that. And my guards. I looked toward Luis and Tom. County authorities can decide whether what happened here crossed a legal line. Her eyes hardened. So you get to stand in the middle of all three and pretend your hands are clean? I shook my head. No. I get to stay out of the parts that aren't mine. Behind her, Deputy Mills photographed the brass marker one final time. Victoria followed my gaze. 12 days earlier, she had called it a technicality. Now it sat at the center of a documented property dispute, while her contractor faced a completely separate federal investigation. She still believed the badge was the twist. It wasn't. The real twist was that every line she had ignored, the property line, the legal line, and the line between private power and public authority, was finally being documented by someone she couldn't order around. By Wednesday morning, Cedar Ridge had stopped calling the ranch road an emergency corridor. Now they called it a misunderstanding. Daniel Price sent the first email at 8:03. Pending completion of title review, Cedar Ridge Estates will suspend contractor access through the disputed coal ranch route. I read it twice, then forwarded it to Luis and Tom. Luis replied with one sentence. Funny how a survey works better after handcuffs. I called him. Don't put that anywhere public. I was joking. Keep joking privately. Yes, boss. The county investigation into their detention was still open, and I wanted nobody turning evidence into neighborhood entertainment. Tom's phone recording had survived, so had my trail camera footage. The camera showed Caleb's security vehicle entering after the secondary chain was cut. It showed Victoria arriving 23 minutes later. It showed her stepping directly past the brass survey marker. Tom's audio captured more. Caleb, what do you want done with them? Victoria, hold them until the sheriff gets here. Caleb, and the equipment? Victoria, secure everything in the corridor. No dramatic confession. No cartoon villain speech. Just ordinary sentences that became important because of where they were spoken and what happened afterward. Deputy Mills collected the original files instead of relying on clips I could have edited. That was exactly how I wanted it. Meanwhile, the federal case remained mostly invisible to me. My screen held. Sarah gave me operational updates only when they didn't involve conflicted evidence. Marcus gave me even less. Friday afternoon, he appeared beside my desk with 2 coffees. One of these is terrible. Which one? Both. I took one anyway. What can you tell me? The contractor remains part of the investigation. Materials recovered under the warrant are being reviewed. Any charges? Nothing I'm discussing with you. Good. He stared at me. You know, normal people hate hearing that. Normal people don't spend 25 years watching cases get damaged by somebody who needed to know too much. 25. 26 next spring. Marcus raised his coffee. My condolences. Monday brought the HOA board meeting. I almost skipped it. Daniel asked me to attend because the board planned to address the access dispute and security contract. The Cedar Ridge clubhouse smelled like polished wood and air conditioning, a strange contrast to the dust still embedded in my truck floor. Victoria sat at the center of the board table in her pink blazer and white blouse. No ranch dust this time. Her expression was controlled again. "Before we begin," she said, "I want residents to understand that recent events have been distorted by individuals with interests adverse to Cedar Ridge." Daniel leaned toward her. "Victoria, stick to the agenda." She ignored him. Federal officers appeared at Mr. Cole's ranch during an HOA enforcement matter. Residents deserve to know whether federal resources were improperly used. Every head turned toward me. I stood slowly. "I agree." That surprised her. "Then explain it." The federal warrant was sought through an investigation independent of my property dispute. It was judicially authorized before my workers called me. When I learned the contractor overlapped with my private dispute, I disclosed the conflict and was screened from relevant evidence decisions. Victoria folded her arms. "And we're supposed to take your word for that?" Sarah's voice came from the back of the room. No, Victoria turned. Sarah stood beside the doorway in civilian clothes. Daniel had invited her only to address procedure, not case substance. The operation timeline and conflict documentation exist independently of Marshal Cole, Sarah said. "I cannot discuss an active investigation, but I can confirm the warrant was not generated by the ranch dispute." Victoria's face tightened. "So the federal government won't tell us what our contractor supposedly did?" "Not tonight." Daniel took over. "What we can discuss is Cedar Ridge's own conduct." He placed a title report on the table. "The completed review has not identified a recorded easement granting the HOA the access claimed across Mr. Cole's ranch road." A murmur moved through the room. Victoria looked at him. "That doesn't eliminate long-standing use rights." "No," Daniel said. "But it means the board should not have represented the matter as settled while legal review was pending." He placed a second document beside it. "And I did not authorize entry onto the ranch Monday." Caleb Ross wasn't there. Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services had been suspended from HOA duties pending review. Victoria looked toward me. "You're enjoying this." "No, your workers get sympathy, your federal colleagues appear on command, and now my board acts like I invented the road." "I didn't ask Sarah to prove you wrong." I pointed toward the title report. "And I didn't write that." One board member cleared his throat. "I move that all Cedar Ridge access activity across the Cole parcel cease unless and until a lawful right is established." The motion passed unanimously. Victoria didn't vote. For the first time since she drove onto my ranch 12 days earlier, the red gate legally meant exactly what it looked like it meant. Stop. But the meeting wasn't over. Daniel opened another folder and looked directly at Victoria. "Now we need to discuss who authorized private security to restrain 2 ranch workers after council had already advised that the access claim remained under review." The room became completely silent. Victoria looked toward the exit. This time there was no federal convoy coming through the gate. No badge to blame. No warrant to call retaliation. Just her board, her attorney, and her own instructions waiting to be explained. Victoria didn't answer Daniel's question immediately. She adjusted the papers in front of her, glanced toward the homeowners filling the clubhouse, and then gave the kind of controlled smile people use when they think confidence can substitute for chronology. "I authorized security to protect Cedar Ridge's access interests," she said. "I did not instruct anyone to mistreat Mr. Cole's employees." Daniel leaned forward. "That wasn't the question." The room went still. "Did you authorize Caleb Ross to hold those workers until law enforcement arrived?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "I instructed security to stabilize the situation." Tom Bennett's recording contains the words, "Hold them until the sheriff gets here." "Is that your voice?" She looked at me. "Nathan has been collecting material against this board from the beginning." "I didn't record you," I said. "Tom's phone did. While interfering with our contractor." Daniel raised a hand. "Victoria, is it your voice?" She stared at him for several seconds. "It appears to be." A low murmur moved through the clubhouse. Daniel opened another document. The title review also confirms that, as of the date of the incident, Cedar Ridge had not established a recorded easement across the Cole parcel at the location where the workers were restrained. Victoria shook her head. "Long-standing access rights can exist outside a recorded easement." "They can," Daniel said. which is why I advised that the matter remained under review. He placed an email on the table. I recognized the date immediately, the afternoon before Caleb's guards came through my gate. This is my message advising that no entry should occur until the title question was resolved. Victoria looked at the page without touching it. One board member asked, "Did security receive that instruction?" Daniel answered, "The security contractor received a separate notice suspending physical access pending review." That changed the room. Victoria turned sharply. "I wasn't copied on that." Daniel slid another page beside the first. "You were." Nobody said anything for a moment. I didn't feel victorious. Luis and Tom had spent almost an hour restrained beside an irrigation trench because too many people had decided a disputed map was enough authority to act first and verify later. There was nothing satisfying about that. Mark Delaney, the board vice president, cleared his throat. "We have two separate issues. First, whether Cedar Ridge had access rights. Second, whether the president exceeded her authority in directing security during a disputed property matter. And a third," Victoria said, "whether Nathan Cole used federal power to intimidate this association." Sarah remained near the back wall. "That allegation has already been addressed." Victoria pointed toward me. "He arrived, then federal officers appeared." "Sequence is not causation," Sarah said. "The federal warrant was approved before the ranch incident. Marshal Cole's conflict disclosure and operational screen were documented before his workers were detained. And the contractor just happened to be involved. The contractor was independently relevant to an existing investigation." "For what?" "I cannot discuss an active federal matter." Victoria laughed without humor. "Convenient." Sarah didn't react. Procedure often feels inconvenient to people who want information they aren't entitled to. Daniel stepped in before Victoria could answer. "The board is not here to litigate the federal investigation." He turned toward the directors. "I recommend Cedar Ridge maintain the suspension of community protection services, preserve all communications relating to the Cole property, and initiate an independent governance review of the president's instructions." Victoria's chair scraped backward. "You're investigating me because a rancher complained?" I stood. "No." Every face turned toward me. Luis and Tom gave statements. The camera recorded the gate. Tom's phone recorded the conversation. The title company reviewed the boundary. Your attorney documented his advice. None of those things depend on who I am. Victoria stared at me. You expect me to believe your badge had nothing to do with this? I took my credential case from my jacket, looked at it, then placed it closed on the table. This badge didn't move the survey marker. Silence. It didn't write Daniel's email. It didn't cut my chain. It didn't put restraints on Luis and Tom. And it didn't tell Caleb to hold them. I pushed the credentials back into my pocket. That's why I stayed out of the decisions that weren't mine. Mark Delaney called for a motion. The board voted 4-1 to continue the security contract suspension and begin the governance review. Victoria cast the only opposing vote. 2 weeks later, Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services received notice that its HOA contract would not be renewed. That decision wasn't based on the federal investigation. The board cited the ranch incident, access policy failures, and the contractor's handling of the workers. The federal case continued on its own track. Marcus told me nothing beyond what I was cleared to know. County authorities reviewed the detention separately. Nobody dragged Victoria from the clubhouse in handcuffs. Nobody needed to. Consequences don't become more legitimate because they happen dramatically. The most important email arrived the following Friday. Cedar Ridge formally withdrew its claim that the Eastern Ranch Road constituted an established HOA-controlled access corridor. I printed the letter and drove out to the red gate. Luis was replacing the irrigation valve. Tom was reinstalling the trail camera. I crouched beside the brass survey marker and wiped away a layer of dust with my thumb. You keeping that thing polished now? Tom asked, thinking about putting a spotlight on it. He laughed. My phone buzzed. Daniel Price. I answered. Nathan, governance review is complete. I looked toward Cedar Ridge beyond the fence. And he paused. The board is meeting Monday to decide whether Victoria Hargrove should remain president. I looked down at the little brass marker she had called a technicality. The federal warrant had exposed the limits of her contractor. The recording had exposed the limits of her story. Now her own board was about to decide the limits of her authority. Victoria Hargrove lost the presidency without a single federal badge in the room. That was important to me. Monday evening, The Cedar Ridge clubhouse was packed before the board meeting started. I stood near the back beside Luis and Tom, still wearing the work shirt I had driven over in. No uniform, no credentials on the table, no federal vehicles outside, just homeowners, directors, Daniel Price, and a stack of documents thick enough to tell the story without me. Victoria sat at the center of the board table in her pink blazer, white blouse, and black heels. Same polished appearance she'd had the first afternoon at my gate. The difference was that nobody was looking at her clothes anymore. They were looking at the governance report. Mark Delaney opened the meeting. The board retained an independent reviewer to evaluate the president's actions concerning the coal ranch access dispute and the direction provided to Cedar Ridge Community Protection Services. Victoria leaned toward her microphone. And I maintain that every decision I made was intended to protect this community. Mark nodded. Your statement is included in the report. He turned a page. The review found that counsel advised the access claim remained unresolved, that security was instructed not to enter the coal parcel pending review, and that Mrs. Hargrove received that communication before the ranch incident. A murmur moved through the room. Victoria shook her head. Receiving an email does not mean I agreed with counsel's interpretation. Daniel answered calmly. You didn't need to agree. You needed to understand that the legal question was unresolved. Mark continued. The review also considered the trail camera footage, county documentation, security reports, and the audio recording from Mr. Bennett's phone. Victoria looked toward Tom. He didn't react. The evidence supports the conclusion, Mark said, that private security entered the disputed parcel and restrained 2 ranch workers after the board's attorney had advised against physical access while title review was pending. Victoria reached for the microphone. Nobody was injured. Luis shifted beside me. I put a hand lightly against his arm before he could respond. Mark looked at Victoria. Whether someone suffered serious injury is not the standard for whether the board exceeded its authority. That landed harder than shouting would have. He moved to the next finding. The review did not find evidence that Marshal Cole used federal authority to initiate, expand, or redirect the federal investigation involving the security contractor. Victoria stared at me. I said nothing. His conflict disclosure and operational screen predated the ranch detention, Mark continued. The federal warrant was judicially authorized before the board became aware of the incident. Victoria's favorite explanation disappeared in one paragraph. She couldn't say I had created the warrant because her guards restrained my workers. The timeline wouldn't let her. Daniel addressed the board. Cedar Ridge has formally withdrawn its claim that the Eastern Ranch Road is an established HOA-controlled access corridor. Any future claim would require separate legal support and appropriate process. Then Mark made the motion. I move that Victoria Hargrove be removed as president of Cedar Ridge Estates and that executive authority be reassigned according to the bylaws. A second came immediately. 4 votes in favor, 1 against. Victorious. Nobody applauded. I was glad. Accountability wasn't supposed to feel like a football game. Victoria sat perfectly still for several seconds, then gathered her papers. As she passed me near the exit, she stopped. You got what you wanted. No, she gave me a tired smile. Your workers are cleared. My security contract is gone. My board removed me. Your road is closed to Cedar Ridge. What exactly didn't you get? The 12 days before any of this happened. Her expression changed. You could have told me you were a federal marshal. Would that have changed how you treated Luis and Tom? She didn't answer. That's why it shouldn't matter. She looked toward the clubhouse doors. You think this proves I had no authority? No, you had authority. I paused. You just kept using it outside its boundaries. She walked away without another word. 3 months later, the ranch looked exactly like a ranch again. No security SUVs outside the fence. No orange cones. No laminated HOA signs. Cedar Ridge hired a different security vendor under revised board policies. The federal contractor investigation continued through the courts and agencies involved. I stayed screened from conflicted evidence until my supervisors cleared the restriction. County authorities handled the ranch detention on their own timeline. I never needed those processes to produce some dramatic arrest to know what had changed. One Saturday morning, Luis and Tom were finishing the irrigation line where the whole thing had started. I replaced the cut chain on the red gate. Tom pointed toward the ground. You know, this whole mess started over that little piece of brass. I crouched beside the survey marker and brushed dirt from its surface. No, no. It started because people kept pretending it wasn't there. Luis laughed. That sounds like something a marshal would say. That sounds like something a rancher would say. I stood and locked the gate. Beyond the fence, Cedar Ridge sat quiet beneath the morning sun. Victoria had believed authority meant having enough guards, enough letters, and enough confidence to make everyone else step aside. I had spent half my life learning the opposite. Real authority knows where it stops. Land has boundaries. Law has boundaries. Power does too. And justice doesn't always arrive with sirens. Sometimes it's already there, buried quietly in the dirt, waiting for someone to respect the line.